Welcome to a joint episode of the Allie G Show and Legwork.
Happy to be here. I'm excited for this one. It's going to be great.
Yes, the first podcast I ever did was with you on the Allie G Show.
Was it Boston?
Right.
It was New York City
it was
half.
New York half.
Yes.
Yeah. It was New York City half.
And so we are continuing the tradition of our doing course strategy and analysis together. Mm-hmm. And today is all about Boston. And this is now Molly and my third time this week having this talk, but now in a recorded session. So we've got a lot of
3.5.
Yes. So we have a lot of rehearsal for today. So today we're going to be covering the essentials of the course. We're going to be breaking this into three components. The first around race day logistics, everything that somebody needs to know on the day and the lead up to picking up one's bib. We will then cover high level the course itself, as well as section by section, and how to approach each of those sections depending on different suggested ways of tackling the course. This is a course that rewards preparation, and we hope that this episode helps you with being prepared on race day. And then the third section will be about nutrition leading up to the race this week and how to properly carb load, some science behind that. And Molly has done a lot of research into that element of racing. And then nutrition, of course, during the race itself, and some key things to keep in mind, particularly if it's looking like it might be, again, a slightly hotter day than we would all like. How does that sound to both of you?
Great. Sounds great to me.
So we have some material that we'll be sharing.
Visuals.
We have some visuals. Yeah, we have some visuals that we'll be sharing. And so for those listening, we will certainly do the best we can, if not expertly, making sure that this is totally fine as a standalone audio podcast. But it will certainly be enhanced by those watching the YouTube version of this, or on the Spotify, the video version.
And you really should look at an elevation profile if you're going to run this regardless.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, for sure. We've all run Boston between us, and Molly, you ran during the infamous Nor'easter year.
I did.
Do you still have nightmares?
I'm very proud of that race.
No, you are. You are.
I was going to say, you should be.
Yeah. I've ran 3 times. This year will be my 4th. And Alex, you've run
Twice. This will be my third.
Yeah, so we've got...
Yeah, and we had a couple COVIDs, you and I, that were not on the course.
Yeah. So not Boston Marathon, but I got a medal for it. I have a medal.
We tried to simulate it, as I recall.
We did, yeah. So I have four medals, because one of them was the virtual medal. So, but I don't think that counts.
We all kind of had different Boston journeys, so maybe we talk about that.
Yeah,
quickly.
sure. Yeah. Molly, what was your Boston journey like?
I worked my ass off to qualify, and it was probably a 3-year process. Even from the time that I thought it was possible, it was another 3 years. I went to school in Boston and lived there for a few years after, so it's always kind of felt like my second hometown. And I knew the course from living there, and I used to go cheer, so it always, aside from just kind of the magic of the Boston Marathon for runners and the history, it felt like doing a hometown marathon, and that was part of why I always wanted to do it.
And part of how we met became
Yeah.
best of friends and now partners was I had paced you through a New York City marathon to get a BQ.
Yeah.
Molly, halfway through the race, famously was like, "You can drop me," and I was like, "I'm not going to drop you. She didn't hire me to pace her, but I
hire you at all.
I know. It was actually kind of forced upon her.
It was.
By
I was totally fine to pace myself.
Yeah. Okay. But all the better.
It was lovely. It all worked out.
Okay. Great. I'm glad that you're. Yeah, it was lovely.
I was not being facetious.
Yeah. So it is special to me for that reason as well. And that was the first time that I cheered, was actually cheering for you. And then I have approached Boston now 3 times. so far, and each time has inched better, but it is just a special race, and I've appreciated the opportunity to be able to do it multiple times, and I always learn something new about it each time. But I have developed a relationship with the course that has always meant something to me, and so I'm really excited that regardless of what happens this coming Monday, that it will be a special day. And I get to run alongside you, Alex. So Alex, why don't you tell us your Boston Marathon story?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know how to follow those two. You guys have way better stories than me. Similar to you, Molly, though, I feel like I'm a mix of both of yours. I worked my ass off for like 2 years, and I let my friends convince me that I could run. I think at the time it was just, my qualifying time was like sub 8 the entire way. I signed up for the Martha's Vineyard Marathon as my first marathon, and we started at like the local YMCA, and I'm like, there's no way that my time is going to count with this chip. Like, they changed the course at the last minute. Everything was a disaster. We ended up running through like the state forest the entire time. So I basically ran my first marathon ever by myself, BQ'd, with a decent enough buffer. And my first Boston ended up being
that was by yourself? You were basically just running?
I was literally, it was me and like one other dude next to me the entire time. And yeah, I ended up running that really hot year as my first Boston, and instead of getting discouraged, I just kept going for it. And similar to you, Matt, every year it gets like an inch better. Like last year, every year I'm like, there's always something going into it. So I've always had a little bit of beef with the course, but every year I keep coming back because it is special. And I set this goal many years ago, and I'm on this path, and I'm just not going to stop till it keeps getting better and better every year.
Yeah, I think Boston in particular has, and this is part of the message of our collection this year, was to help think about the fact that we often approach this race in particular because for many it comes with a qualifying time, and that you're then constantly reaching for this time, and that when we get there and then we do the day and we're also then still pushing and reaching for something, that it bears reminding that we got there through that hard work and that we earned being there.
I always think of it as a coach talking to athletes, like the amount of meaning we put on like the last 26 miles of a training cycle that's thousands of miles. Like, yes, that's the celebration and that's the time that the world sees, but that's not the process.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important point, Molly, because I found myself the last week being like, all right, this is the last real like speed tune-up. This is the last, like, you know, all of these like quote unquote last moments of this training cycle for Boston. And I'm celebrating a win every day. And that's the cool part about it, because like a lot of people go into Boston, and I think a lot of other marathons, with this pressure of I have to show everything I've done in the last 4 months in this one race. And I feel like if you just celebrate a little bit along the way, and then you just look back and recognize all of these things you did, and you're just like, oh, it's taper time. Thank goodness. Some people are like, thank goodness. Some people are, you know, having the crazies. But when you look back, you're like, wow, that was a lot of miles.
Yeah, and we've seen, I mean, the Olympics were this past winter, and Alyssa Liu, and she's among the most recent examples, but there are plenty of other athletes, perhaps in contrast to that, Ilya Malinin, that have a different relationship to their performance. And of course, Alyssa cared deeply, much as runners, we care deeply, but she didn't tie her succeeding or not to her worth. And the end result was that she came out on top, versus Ilya, who I think did recognize that there was this tying of a little bit of his success to his worth, and came out nowhere near on top, right? There's plenty of other athletes, Olympians in particular, who have shown that a particular approach and mentality towards what is the final stage is really critical, and that by not tying it so inherently to some essential time goal has the effect of actually helping you achieve the very time that you're not focusing on. So it's an interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's easier for me now coaching people than it was certainly, like, I think as an athlete, but I mean, the times I obviously, like, I want all of my athletes to have an amazing day, but I also, when people have a bad day, like, that doesn't change the way, like, I looked at every workout you did. Like, this single day does not change all the work that you put in or the fitness you have, or, you know, sometimes you just don't get the day.
Yeah.
And I think that's something you just kind of have to be willing to put the work in and truly accept you may not get the day. And that probably makes it easier to just kind of let go and have the best day you can.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say before we get into our strategy is, you know, we do a shakeout, as both of you know, and we've done the shakeout for several years now. And we have a lot of people coming back year after year. And part of it is because we take it so chill. We don't have, like, we take photos in front of Levain Bakery, but we don't have a photographer following us, and we don't make it like this like spectacle. And the day is enough of a spectacle. And I think that being able to kind of breathe and not worry about everything the entire weekend is hopefully some peace of mind. So if anybody listening would like to join us in Boston for our shakeout, it's on our website. Just go to backline.com/Boston. And at the bottom of the page, which has the rest of our collection, you'll see the links to sign up. It's also on our Instagram, which we posted today, and we'll post a couple times this week for stories. But even if you're listening to this outside of the next, you know, the lead up to Boston this year, it's something that we pretty reliably do every year. And we always call Levain Bakery and we're like, hey, remember us? And they're like, yeah. And we kind of like overtake this bakery who doesn't really have a sort of private seating thing. With that, though, we still care about making sure that we're prepared and that we're not leaving the day to unintended setbacks simply because we didn't pay attention or weren't prepared for what the day entailed. And so that's what really this episode is about. So Molly, with that, why don't you start us with the very first thing that we do when we begin our Boston Marathon adventure?
Yeah, so we're going to start with the Expo, which I do recommend doing very early in your Boston adventure, just because the later you wait, the more crowded it's going to get. It's a pretty standard Expo, as you know, if you've done any of the majors, it's going to look similar. It is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. There's slightly different time frames each day, so make sure you check that. It's at Hines, which is more downtown near the finish line. Hines is a little easier just because it's more central. And just bring your photo ID and your registration email, and everything is kind of as expected once you're there.
This is pretty well organized.
Yeah. As
you said, it's a pretty standard Expo. It is not, I think, abundantly chaotic. I think the bibs and everything is separate. I think it's almost on a separate section.
Entrance. Yeah, not entrance, but
section to the rest of the Expo.
So race morning, make sure you organize everything in advance. You need your race number, obviously, pre-race snacks, and all of your race hydration. It must fit in a 1-gallon Ziploc bag. I don't know that they are particularly strict about that, but I suspect it's sort of like TSA, where it's probably just easier if it's in a bag and then nobody has any questions.
Yeah.
You do get, I believe, a starting village bag when you go to the Expo. So that's where you can put a toss layer and your Ziploc with your fuel and all of that stuff. Toss layers may not be needed this year if it is warm, but one thing I would recommend is if you have an old space blanket from a race, or there's still time to just order, you can get space blankets that are like folded up into like a little 3-inch square, and those are just really helpful in Athletes Village. It looks like it may rain a few days before the race. So if you want to be able to sit down, the grass is probably going to be a little bit wet. So just being able to have something so you can sit or lay down and relax before the gun goes off.
I think the space blanket is a real pro tip because you've got and Alex is going to talk about this when we get to the starting village section, but there's this huge tent, but there's also a pretty significant portion of the grounds that are not under a tent. And so if they're damp at all, like just having a space blanket helps ensure that you're not like getting a wet booty.
Nobody wants a wet booty.
No.
Not on race day.
No.
Or any day, really.
Yeah.
Transportation. So if you're doing the shuttle to the start, you're going to go essentially to Boston Common is where they leave. And you're going to have a window of time that's based on your wave start and your number. And you just show up. They're very good. There's a ton of volunteers, and they are super good at just putting you on a bus. For people that have run New York and experienced the buses once you get to Staten Island, that to me always feels like a very stressful process every time I run it, because it feels like you kind of have to jockey because there's way more people arriving on the ferry than can fit on buses. Here, I did not have that sense. They just there's constantly buses circulating through. So just get in line. You're going to get on a bus. It's going to be fine. Don't stress. They are just standard school buses, so there's no bathrooms, and it's probably like a 45, 50-minute drive would be my guess.
Yeah,
so
I am actually pretty positive that all of the porta potties in that area are all closed up.
They're
not so do not expect to be able to if you got to travel to get into where the buses are, there's not really, especially if you're one of the earlier waves, there's really not a place to go to the bathroom. I think they're because they're meant for the finish.
Right.
They're not meant for.
Yeah, I believe they're all still closed.
Yeah.
Or maybe open for volunteers, but that's it.
Right. But this is a very organized thing. I've done the bus all but 2 out of the 3 years, and then 1 year, we'll talk about this in a second, of getting yourself to the start. There are ways to do it, but there comes with some risks. But the buses are the kind of surefire way of getting there.
Yeah, and if you're staying not near the finish line and you're going to have to get planned transportation to the bus, just double check based on your bus time, because the T does not run all night. So if you're trying to get there early, you may not be able to count on the train.
I've taken the T because I always stay in Brookline, so I take the T a few stops to the Commons, and then I honestly have never had an issue getting on the bus ever. To your guys' point, it's super organized. I will say I second the bathroom thing, and I'm always a nervous peer, so having no bathroom before I get on the bus is always a little bit anxiety inducing for me, but I've never had a problem getting on the bus.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you are in a later wave, that whole street is lined with businesses. So there's a Dunkin' Donuts and an Au Bon Pain and stuff. So if you're in a wave that's probably after 8, or your bus time is after 8, all those businesses will be open if you need to grab a coffee or something. But obviously, if you're in one of the earlier buses, then those businesses will still be closed.
Yeah. So getting yourself to the start is an interesting one. There are a couple of parking lots that you can get to specifically for participants. But
you would have to be solo in the car, because the only way you can get on the shuttle that takes you from the parking lot to the start is with a bib. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So you could probably have, I don't know this for sure, but if you were with another person, they would have to just leave with the car.
Yeah.
Because there's no way for that person to get anywhere.
Right. Yeah. And I would say that not all the road closures are on Google. And so you and I tried to get not to the parking lot, but we tried to get as close as we could to the start, to the high school. And everything was just closed. We just could not figure out. And so I ended up being 1.5 miles. And so if this is a route you plan on taking, definitely that is one that you plan in advance.
And I think those road closures, we had a friend who had done it a couple years before and was able to get much closer. So I think sometimes those may change from year to year.
Yeah. I just think the buses are a lot easier. Yeah. But, for some, you're staying on the like opposite end side of
Right.
Hopkinton. And so like trying to then come in just to then go back out.
Yeah.
I think the only other thing I would say about the buses is that the ride is nerve-wrackingly long. And one of the years I did it, it wasn't the nor'easter year, but it rained. And it was torrential downpouring. And it all finished up before the race. And so like we weren't really worried about like it was scheduled to end like pretty early, but I was the first wave. And so like it was like pouring down. And so the bus was just absolutely silent. And we're like just driving through and you're in this long line of buses on the highway. I think it's such a long ride that you eventually say to yourself, I have to run all this back, and we've been driving for like 60 miles an hour for like an hour. Like, how is this possible?
So I was rereading Des Linden's book in preparation for our book club, and I had forgotten, but she actually says the same thing, that no matter how many times she runs it, at some point on the bus ride, she like gets kind of freaked out that she has to run the whole way back.
Yeah.
So even Des.
Yeah. So we're in good company. Okay, this is something that one should know in terms of what we're showing on the screen is the different bibs and what bus loading time is. So if you're listening, just be aware of what your bus loading time is, and based on your bib number, that's going to determine what bus you should be getting to the extent that you are traveling by bus.
Yeah, and the volunteers do stick to whatever bib color is loading at the time. So don't think that if you get there early that you're going to be able to get on an earlier bus if it's before your window.
Yeah. Alex, you want to take us through what starting a village, Athletes Village, looks like, and your experience with the tent and the porta potties and just the general vibe?
Absolutely. I think the general vibe is, first of all, it's packed. You're just on one bus in your one wave, and there are like 10 other buses of people that are also in your wave, and they're all following each other on the highway. So when you get into Athletes Village and you're pulling up, everybody is getting off pretty much at the same time in a row of buses. So it can get packed pretty quickly. And from my past experiences, the waves that were about to go before me were still kind of huddling in that area under the tent, and they had already been there for a while. So like the tent has usually been taken by the time I get there. I'm sure for people in earlier waves, it's a little bit less crowded. To second what you guys said earlier, definitely bring a space blanket, something to sit on. And I would say my one, I don't know if it's like a pro tip, I'm not trying to gas myself up, but like I never go to the porta potty by the tent, because I feel like they're going to be the worst by the time you get there, especially if you're in a later wave. And just know that when you walk down the long road to the actual start line, there's like another village of porta potties, and there's like a bunch of concrete, so you can actually sit there too. But again, bring something to sit on because it's really hot.
There's also a ton of urinals so they have like a whole urinal section in Athletes Village. I know. Hey, freeze up the lines.
That's true.
That's so
good. But yeah, I think the one immediately next to the tent might be like what might be a challenge. But I think like I usually like to try and go twice. So I'll go in that one, and then maybe I have enough time to go to the one like that's later once you get released into the corrals. But I think at that point you're starting to get close to the start, and so I might be worried about like totally waiting until then.
That's another thing to note too, is I don't know what it's been like for other people in the last I've only ran it the last 2 years in a row, and every time I've gotten on the bus or in the bus line at the time that I was instructed to, and I'm always early because I'm always freaking out that I'm going to be late, and somehow I feel like I never have enough time in Athletes Village. And whether that's just my mind playing tricks on me because of like nerves, or it's like legitimately I'm running out of time, I would just say leave yourself extra time for everything, like bathroom, eating your second breakfast if the timing is right, if that's how your plan is, and definitely leave enough time to walk to the start. And if you have to go to the bathroom on the way, leave yourself extra time to do that too, because I feel like I always run out of time.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like if you've run New York, you're used to having a really like too much time once you get to Staten Island that you're trying to just kind of keep yourself occupied. And for Chicago or races where it's much more centralized and you don't have to move, and you're not getting transported to a start. It's you have as much time as you want to allow, but Boston is very much this is the window.
Yeah.
And you can't
when they call you.
Yeah, you can't control
you gotta
that. Like you're on a bus, you get there, and then that's how much time you have.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say, I don't know. I think I have felt sometimes like I had not too much time, but that I think this is all where like time is relative, and I felt like I had, even though we're not talking like hours, but I was just sitting there nervous before getting, and so that then has the effect of elongating the time for me, where like I look at my watch and I feel like it's been 5 minutes and it's been like 30 seconds. So, yeah.
So I think we should talk about how long the walk is.
Yeah. So once you've done your waiting and you get called, they have a massive loudspeaker and a big jumbotron, and they call your wave. And they bring you to this outdoor hangar-looking thing that's a little bit narrow, and it has a number of corrals, and that just kind of helps sort you like a sorting hat into general stratification of the runners. It does seem that there's something that's potentially new this year, because I've always been Corral 1 and I've always gone down the path that brings you by the CVS. But this year's course information shows that Corrals 1 to 4 actually takes a divergence and goes down a parallel road that brings you to the runner corrals and the start line. I think that's to help reduce congestion by the CVS that most people, if you've run this before, have gone through. So, but it does appear that this other path takes you by porta potties. So if you are a runner like me, who has usually been in corrals, 1 or 2, and you're used to going by the CVS, that does not appear to be the case this year. And whether this slide stands the test of future years, TBD, but that's at least the case for 2026. It is a long road. It's about half a mile right from the high school to the Hopkinton start line. So you've got a bit of time. Once you get to the runner corrals, I don't recall, Alex, correct me if you think I'm wrong here, I don't recall there really being porta potties by the runner corrals. So dissimilar from NYRR races where there's porta potties in the corrals, I don't recall there being really any porta potties along Main Street, that it's all kind of either in Athletes Village or in these 2 spots, or rather 1 spot in the walk to the runner corral. But once you get to Main Street, I don't believe there are, if there are porta potties, it might be a handful, but it's
CVS is your last shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you're used to an organization like NYRR or at home having porta potties in the, starting corrals, that's not going to be the case. I mean, I guess in a way it's kind of like New York City Marathon, where you have the staging area. And once you get onto the bridge, there are no porta potties on the bridge. And I think that's probably similar to this.
Yeah.
Okay. So the waves this year, the first one starts at 10, the last one starts at 11:21. It's very precise. Although I think, don't the elite women start before wave 1?
I think they do, yeah. I think it's elite women and then elite men and open wave 1.
Yeah, I believe the wheelchair division is also in advance of wave 1. So so that starts just before 10. So
unless you are an elite woman, this is your wave schedule.
Correct. I think it's worth sort of stating in looking at the wave schedule that, especially if you're later, you're going to be dealing with the hottest part of the day. Yeah. And so when you're talking about what the weather is going to be for you, and you've got friends that are in different waves, just make sure that that's a consideration, because what it's at the start is potentially going to be different than what it's at the finish line.
Yeah, and think about your hydration strategy and potentially nutrition also with that in mind. Which
we will have a whole section on later in the podcast.
I'm just teasing it.
Yeah, you are. You're doing a great job being a tease.
Thanks. So I think whatever wave you're in, you're not going to probably be on your normal schedule. So my recommendation is always to try to eat your first breakfast at the time you are normally eating breakfast on a normal day. It's just so that your body can sort of do its normal things, and then back out enough time from your start to figure out like if you're going to do a second breakfast or a snack, when that is. And usually I recommend 2 hours before to kind of stop solid food, other than maybe like a gel or something like that, and an hour for liquids. But it is really something that you want to have a plan for ahead of time and not just be kind of winging it once you get to Boston to try to figure out what you're buying and when you're going to eat it.
Yeah. I do best on an emptier stomach, and I hate having breakfast in the morning before a marathon. But the part that I do that is super important and that I do challenge myself on is especially the water part, and not sort of diluting, myself, particularly when we start talking about, sodium loading and that type of thing, which we'll again talk about later. But also because it is a 10 a.m. start.
Yeah.
I think
even for the earliest wave.
Even for that's, I also don't want to have my stomach grumbling.
Yeah. You're potentially missing 2 meals if you skip breakfast. And that's a hard thing when you're also running that much.
My strategy is half a banana.
Yeah.
Not a full banana, not a quarter
Just
of a
a
banana,
half.
Just a half. I don't know. There's something about just half a banana. Oh, and then like maybe a handful of blueberries. Mike Wardian, who I am not ashamed to say is pacing me this year, and I am thrilled to have Mike Wardian as a pacer.
As one should be.
Yes. He stayed at my house not that long ago, and I said,
"That is true." He requested blueberries,
which is actually my like, half a banana and like a handful of blueberries. Mm-hmm. So
there you go.
Breakfast of champions.
I actually hate eating breakfast also, but marathon day is like a non-negotiable for me because I really think it helps a ton. So my first breakfast is usually a dry bagel. Everybody makes fun of me because I don't put anything on it. I just eat like a cinnamon raisin bagel and a full banana. It doesn't gross me out. I don't know why it grosses everybody out. It doesn't.
Oh no, it doesn't gross me out. I just like.
Is it toasted or not?
You
toasted?
toast it with a little bit of butter.
No, I don't put butter on it. I do toast it because I like when it's like
you
soft.
just go in there.
Yeah, toasted. I can.
You just raw dog a bagel.
Yeah, I do. I raw dog a bagel, and I eat a full banana, not a half.
Ew.
And I know, so judgy. And then my snack is usually like sometimes I'll eat like half an Uncrustable and some peanut M&Ms.
You know what's funny about you and Uncrustables? We had Uncrustables.
I hate them.
We had Uncrustables for you at your Ultra, and you were like, ew, no.
When you guys gave me that, no joke, I think that was, I was borderline tears because I started gagging.
So why do you make that your part of your marathon morning?
It's because it doesn't gross me out then. I think at the Ultra it was just,
fair.
It's just.
How is that fair? No, don't let her off with this.
No, come on.
Like every Ultra you go by, like scones or something.
Okay.
And you're like, this is what I want.
Just because I have an elevated taste profile.
Okay, weirdo.
The scones during the race, you're like, it's so dry. How can I? But I just go along with it now when you pick something out because you're always so happy when you get it and you're dreaming of like how good it's going to be.
I do. This is something.
It's fine.
Yeah, this is something that I do. But those are for ultras
scone.
and ultra marathon nutrition practices will be for another podcast for another day. But yeah, if you didn't have a breakfast, I think that you can still. I think that like you can still exercise good nutritional decisions during race, and obviously you will have carb loaded. You might be grumbly. I think the thing where you could actually hamper your performance is if you're like just chugging on water. Yeah. And that's where I think that would be like for me a really important guardrail that like somebody should not just be like having like you should not have downed a bottle of water by the time you like wake up to the time that you get to the start line. Like I don't think that's a good idea, and you're diluting. You're just diluting yourself.
Yeah, my race morning thing is always a smoothie, just because I feel like it goes down easy and you can get a lot in there.
Yeah. So Molly, what makes Boston such a technical course, and why does everybody think it is? I think
It's
that,
easy?
well, I think that there's two camps. There's the, it's like super hard, or the like, oh, this is going to be super easy because there's like.
It's net downhill.
It's net
That's
downhill.
all you need to know.
And that like, yeah, your first 16 are downhill and, you know, it's a downhill finish.
It runs itself, basically.
It basically, yeah, it runs itself. I do think, while I am of the belief that New York City Marathon is harder than Boston for a number of reasons. I'm sure people listening might debate me on that one. I am more than happy to debate that with somebody. But that doesn't take away from the fact that Boston is still very technical.
Yeah, and I think I love that about Boston.
Yeah.
I think it's a course that if you are tactical and prepared, you can beat runners that are objectively faster than you. Just by doing a better job of tactics, which to me is like a super fun challenge.
Yeah. Alex, you've run New York and Boston, and did you run Berlin?
I never ran Berlin, no.
Okay. I mean, that one's flat, as is Chicago. But between New York and Boston, what would you say was harder?
Oh, New York, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I've said it a bunch on my pod because people debate it all the time. I think it's significantly harder.
I think it is significantly harder, especially if you do Boston well. I think if you don't do Boston well and you get absolutely destroyed, then I think that's where people will debate and say, no, Boston's harder. But I think that if you approach, if like all things being equal, you listened to this amazing podcast and were fully prepared and you approached the day with intention, and did the same thing with New York, I think that somebody would find New York ultimately harder. And I think that's actually the point of this, which is that like we don't have to make this harder on ourselves than it already is. Yeah. We're not saying it's easy, just to be clear. No, I don't think any of the three of us are saying this is an easy course, and it is in fact a hard course. It's just that there are ways to make it easier. Can you walk us through, Molly, the thing about how the course is structured? Not just that there's downhill, not just that there are uphill, but how does the structure of it make it the difficulty level that it is?
Well, I think in contrast to something like New York, which I agree, I would say Boston is faster for sure. But I think the thing that maybe helps with New York is because you have hills that are sort of distributed throughout, you kind of have to like check yourself
before you wreck yourself.
Exactly. So you're not, I mean, yes, you can kind of get in trouble in the first half if you go too fast and then you hit the Queensboro, but there are uphills sprinkled.
As I have done.
Yes, there are uphills sprinkled throughout, and I think you do get a sense earlier if you are working too hard. Boston does not necessarily give you those cues, and so I think it's just, Boston is not a course that I think, unless you know it very well and have a lot of experience, you can really run by feel.
Yes, I agree that like the usual cues are not going to give you the true sense of what's going on.
Yeah. So the first 16 miles are downhill or flat. And typically when people have a Boston that goes sideways, what has happened is they go hard in those first 16 miles, and because you're rested and you're tapered, and this is probably the least tired your legs have been in months, and you're running downhill and everyone around you is going out too fast, it's really easy to talk yourself into, I'm just having a really great day.
Yeah.
And, you're going maybe 10 seconds faster than marathon pace, or 15 on some of the downhills, and that starts to compound, but you're not really, I think most runners are used to sort of cueing exertion based on how you're feeling aerobically, and those cues won't necessarily be there, or they're going to be telling you this is what I should be feeling.
So people get okay with pushing it.
Yeah, so in fact you are going harder and faster than you should be. Your muscles are also getting kind of hammered on that downhill, and you're not going to feel that until later.
For a while, yeah.
So you can just kind of be compounding and digging yourself into a hole that you don't know you're in until you hit the Dune Hills.
This is also the risk of like whether it's drinking to thirst or eating to like you're hungry, if you feel like you haven't exerted yourself as much, you may not consume as much, right? I mean, if you think about that from the context of, on a hot day, if it's not as hot, then we generally don't drink as much. I think here there's also that feeling of like, if I'm not working as hard, then you may not remember to like, consume as much. But I think having a plan during this and executing on that plan to consume your nutrition and hydration will be critical, even if you don't feel like you are exerting yourself as much. And in fact, if you are doing it right, you are just slower than your marathon pace. And we'll talk about why I'm saying just slower than your marathon pace in a little bit. And you should feel good.
It should feel significantly easier.
Yeah. The challenge that I think we've seen a lot, and Steve Magnus talks about this in his book a bit of Do Hard Things, and we've talked about it as coaches, is that, where people get into trouble is where there's this disparity between what your current perceived rate of exertion is and what the expected rate of exertion is. And so if your current perceived is much less than where you think you should be, then you're fine. If that inverse is, then that's when you start freaking out. And so I think it's easy to say, I'm going to push it because I feel like I should be, I feel like I'm not working at all. And so people then push it, but then what they don't realize is that they're borrowing from later you.
And I think kind of to the same point, because you've had kind of an easier course up until the hills come as kind of a shock and can also make you feel like you're working way harder than you should be.
Right.
Just one thing to add there, I think it's especially easy to slip into that false sense of everything is fine, because the first super steep downhill, when you're down there and you're like cruising, you're like, oh, and this feels good. And then like 5 miles in, you're going to have that false sense of like, oh, everything's fine. I'm feeling good. And then it's going to catch up to you for sure.
Yeah. And I think it's also like you do need to, even if you, especially that first mile where it's pretty steep, if you're a little faster than race pace there, just to kind of keep your legs under you, you really do need to correct that. And it's also, I think it's often easy when you run down a hill to just kind of keep cruising at that pace, especially if it's early. And so just, this is a race, I think, where you want to be checking your watch a little bit. You need to be on top of the numbers a little bit more.
Right, and making sure that you're not pushing it.
Yeah.
Right, because then you're going to get to the 4 miles from 16 to 20, 21. The terrain is going to demand power. But if you've stripped your legs of the ability to yield that power because of how much force they've been taking, that's when you really start to feel like your RPE just completely flips. From I was doing fine to all of a sudden I'm not.
I've always, when I've been cheering or holding bottles for people I'm coaching, I'm usually in the Newton Hills is where I position myself. And even in like the front of wave one, the number of people that are walking by the time they hit the third of the hills is surprising.
Yep. And that's where I think then you get to the final 10K and you've had then the impact forces, as we just said, right, as a common mistake of you're going a little too fast. You then are giving everything you have to maintain pace up through the hills, and then you're spent by the time you get to the last 10K. And then it just hurts going down from 21 to about 24 until it then flattens out again. And then you're on your own for the last 2 miles, right, to get home. There's no downhill helping you. Alex, what have you learned in the first 2 that you've done that you're like, not making that again?
Great question. The first one, I was significantly underfueled for how hot it was. I was severely dehydrated by the time I got to the Newton Hills, and I was burned.
Oh my God, Alex!
I could not do it.
Can I tell you my first time doing Boston? I think it was also very hot.
Me. That was my first time, so I'm sure it's going to be.
And I can't remember. I think it was like 2019, and I distinctly remember this is like mile 24. And it got to the flat part. And I swear to God, I was invisible because I kept being like, water. Does anybody have water?
To spectators?
Yeah, I was just like, I was literally, I was begging. I was begging anyone to give me anything. And like, I wasn't getting, either I was like, you know, like when Kate Winslet is screaming for help, she's like, help. You know, and like, of course, nobody's going to hear her when she's like sitting on the door in the frozen water. I feel like that's what I was like, where I'm like, water. Nobody actually hearing me. Yeah.
And mine, in the torrential rain, my shoe somehow came untied. And this was, I want to say it was in the hills. It was maybe mile 18. And my hands were so cold that I could not tie my shoe, and some like very kind spectator tied my shoe for me.
Oh.
It was very sweet.
Wow. That's so sweet. I love that.
Alex, I did not mean to interrupt you. So
that was great. I'm glad you did. I can picture you like water. You know, in like SpongeBob when he's like drying up as a sponge.
Yeah.
He's like,
oh no, that is exactly what happened. There are photos from my first where I look so effing haggard. Like, I think we should post that on the gram and say, like,
you have to.
This is what happens if you don't listen to our pod. This is what will happen to your tail. Like,
kind of have like dead eyes too.
Oh yeah. No, it looks like I am inches from death. So yeah, that was that year. It was horrible.
I didn't look like I was inches from death. Somehow I pulled myself together in that regard, but I was taking things from strangers. I did walk on the Newton Hills for the first time in any marathon I ever did. So I was like just in that section fighting for my life, feeling so discouraged. And yeah, I just crawled through the last 10K because, to your point, you go down and you're just in pain. And then last year I tried to just maintain pace, and it worked out well for me. Maybe I'll negative split one day. I feel like I need to learn more from you, Molly, but I know.
I've only just learned that.
Yeah. Alex, you want to do it next year? I will pace you next year. Without a doubt.
Yeah, I would love for you to pace me.
And we will negative split the shit out of Boston.
Yeah, we will. Yeah, we will. But no, I learn something new every year. That was my point.
Yeah. I mean, marathoning in general is something that you like continually learn from, but I think Boston Marathon in particular is one that like you can learn from every year. Des has also said the same thing, and she's run it like a dozen times.
Yeah. I think that's why I love it so much, because like kind of what you were talking about earlier, Molly, it's like it's so tactical, and it gives me a challenge. Not that a marathon isn't challenging. I don't want to discount that, but it's all challenging. But for some reason, Boston is that one where you're just like, man, I really want to master it. And I don't know that there's a way to master it, but you just want to keep trying.
Yeah. So Boston Marathon at a high level is actually about 90% level. And level is defined by plus or minus 3% grade. And then when you look at increases from 3 to 7% grade and greater than 7% grade, that makes up the rest of the about 10% of the course. About a little over 1% is very steep. That's more than 7%. 2.1% is in uphill, and so most that's going to be concentrated in your mile 15 and a half, 16 through 21. And then you also have 4.1% downhill, which would be greater than 3%, and then 2% steep downhill. So that would be greater than a 7% grade down. So, you know, in large part, Boston's actually a lot flatter than I think people think. But because it is either flat or down for the majority, like if you add up the level and the down, you're at about 97%, right? 97% of the course is either flat or down. And it would only really be, especially if you're excluding the like little bits that kind of like come up and down that are undulating that you don't really call a hill per se, then you're really only left with just over 3% that is actually uphill. So it's... but I think when you zoom out and look at that, it kind of helps then put into perspective what it is that you're going to tackle throughout the day. So we're now going to get into each section of the course. As a quote by Des Linden, the first 6 miles are predominantly downhill. The race isn't won on those descents, but it definitely can be lost there. I totally think that's true. And the first mile to 2, when you just have so many people going irresponsibly fast out of the starting line. And Alex, I'm sure you've seen that on your starts where you're like, wow, people are really ripping it right now. And many of those people that you'll see later, I mean, something I always say is you're either legitimately faster than me or I am going to see you later. And I am fine with either of those things being true. When we get to the Newton Hills, I think one thing that is really important to know as well when we're talking about hills generally is that speed is highly correlated to hill speed, meaning that like if you are fast in general, and if you're coming to this and saying like, geez, I kind of forgot about doing like lots of uphill, as long as you were also doing proper speed work, then being faster on flat will generally mean that you are faster going up. I think that where doing some uphill and downhill bouts, and if you're listening to this the week before, this is a little bit too late, but we talk about doing downhill training, not only uphill training, but downhill training, and you can do that 3 weeks and 6 weeks out to help prepare your legs. And a lot of that is neuromuscular advantages, not so much speed advantages of running on that, but just literally becoming more efficient running on hills.
Your muscles are not naturally as efficient when they are catching you in an extended position, which is what is happening on a hill.
Right.
So a lot of the benefit of doing those inoculation doses is just that your body physically just gets better at coordinating that so that the dominant muscle fibers aren't taking all of the load, which is why you tend to get super sore the first few times.
And I think that's an interesting part that people don't realize about hill training. I mean, there's a lot of benefits of doing hill workouts, but that's one of them is that you're literally maintaining your efficiency while doing them. And because you are therefore more efficient, it means that you are not degrading your muscles, to such an extent that you're going to then you're not letting yourself become sorer than you need to be. Yeah. So let's talk about the first 4 miles. Mile 1 is super steep down, Alex, as you said. Though I don't know if you have the same experience that I did. I know your race, Molly, was the nor'easter, and so like it was just a challenging year in general for just having it be a normal experience.
Was challenging.
Yeah, but there is a uphill in the first mile that always surprises me, and I'm like, what is this doing here? Yeah. And I always am confused as to why I'm now going back uphill. So you do have this very, very steep downhill mile, or close to a mile. You come back up and then you then start going back down again. It's pretty crowded. I was talking about this when we did the core strategy session here at Backline HQ, and I kind of go back and forth as to whether you should be in the middle or whether you should be on the outskirts. I think sometimes you can get caught in the middle, and this is not a time where you want to be doing a lot of weaving. I think that obviously you got to be watching where you're going, and this is really where you're probably going to be doing more paying attention to like those around you who are also jockeying for where they want to go. And there's going to be people probably in every wave and every corral who are on the outer edges that are trying to then like get ahead of other people that they perceive to be going slower than what they would like to be going. People will be jumping on the sidewalks as well. So the first mile, I would say, is just like pretty chaotic because it's downhill and because people are trying to get a good position. But most of this is straight, right? There are 3 turns in this entire thing. It's right at the firehouse, right at Hereford, and left on Boyleston. Those are the 3 turns you take the entire time. Everything else is a sort of gentle curve. And so, you're at least not really dealing with turning during these early miles. It's still, I think, a little bit more chaotic than one would.
And I think I would let that work to my advantage in terms of not, if it slows you down a little bit, that's fine. I would not waste the energy trying to get around somebody, and it probably is doing you a little bit of a favor, unless it's, really far off your race pace. I think it's fine to just kind of settle in and try to get yourself settled rather than fighting and trying. Like, where you end up physically on the edge or in the middle in the first mile is not going to make or break your race.
Yeah.
I feel like similar to you, I feel like it's just always kind of chaotic in that first mile again, because you're going it's such a steep downhill. But the one thing I will add is that for whatever purpose people are walking, like, you know how some people may start in like the first wave, whether it's, you know, I've from my personal experience, it's a lot of like military personnel that are out there to do the Boston Marathon, and they are like walking it with their crew and with their people. A lot of the times I have seen them hang on the outskirts. So if that's your plan, that's one thing I would look out for. Like, it's happened to me personally where I'm kind of just trying to hug the side a little bit to stay out of the chaos in the middle. So just one thing to be aware of, that, you know, they're trying to also respect everybody else that's trying to run, and they're walking. So they're kind of trying to get out of the way, and you're trying to like hug the side. So like that's one thing that I've experienced. But outside of that, I feel like the first 4 miles for me is always just like trying to settle into the pace and not go out too fast.
Yeah, to your point, like the first mile, you definitely don't want to be like 30 seconds faster. I think it's way too easy to be almost 30 seconds faster per mile on your first mile. That would be a very bad start, in my opinion. Yeah. And I think that one really should, to your point,
you can recover from it. But,
yeah.
And I think we said this over the weekend when we were doing this. I think it's good to kind of know where you should be by mile 3, like know what that first 5K split is. And then if your first mile is too fast, then just really pull it back on 2 and 3. It's not like you can't recover from that if you do kind of get swept up in it in the first mile. But just really, I think by mile 3, you need to be on a disciplined pace.
Yeah. I agree with that.
And it's like a little, I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion, but it is kind of boring in the first few miles. Like, there's not much around. It's kind of more residential. I mean, don't get me wrong. People do show up and they're definitely screaming and cheering, but it's one of the more like low key parts of the course. Yeah. So you kind of do have that time to just kind of be on your own without everybody screaming at you, like in Newton and in the college towns.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the first 16 really, you've got like your sporadic towns, but it's not really until 16, 17 that like you get sustained crowd support. Yeah. I would say actually my slightly different take there would be that at least the first 4, because it's residential, you have families that are out and they're on their lawn and they're cheering. There are large parts of the course from 4 to 15 that are entirely like desolate in a way, right? You're either along a highway, you're going along a lake, you're in between towns. There's really not that much going on. At least in the first few, you've got families out who are, cheering and everything. So that brings us then to, I think, mile 6, which would then be Framingham. And this is I think probably the first biggest sort of cheer, like where there's a ton of people.
You're in a town center.
Yeah, you're in a town center, and there's a ton of people. You cross this sort of train track, and there's just a lot of people. And kind of coming through that mile 6 is really when you have finished the first 6 of the steeper parts of the race that are down, right? After 6,
you're not really going to get any more downhill until Newton Hills, like
there's
the
some
backs of the Newton Hills, and then when you're approaching Boston, you're basically level.
Yeah, there's some in here, but I think this is largely undulating over the next bit of time. 11, you have a nice downhill, but most of the rest of this through 16 through 15 is pretty flat. And like I said, there's large parts where you really don't have a ton of crowd support. And so this is where it gets like hard in that way. Like that's what's hard about this section that's a little bit more flat, is that people are like, I thought this was going to be more downhill because I've been told that the first 16 is down. And that's true if you look at the elevation point at 16 and the elevation point at 1. But the nuance is looking at it from, section by section, where you realize that actually there's a good chunk of this that's largely flat. Staying on top of fueling during these miles is pretty critical. Now, once you get to 15 and a half is where you have a pretty aggressive downhill. And that is definitely going to be I would say to anybody, like, that's a distinct marker of when things start to change, is that you have this very steep downhill at around 15 and a half. It's pretty aggressive. And when you come out of that, it's almost like you're coming out of a bowl, right? And you then begin your first sort of uphill into the Newton Hills at the beginning of 16. There are 4 hills. A lot of people mistake the third one just because of its steepness especially if you haven't run it before, as Heartbreak Hill. At that time, I was not on Heartbreak Hill. I had somebody around me say, "Is this it? Is this it?" not saying like, "Oh, is this it?"
Yeah.
He was just like, "Are we there? Are we at Heartbreak?" And I was like, "No, bro. Like, you've got another."
Not yet.
The one thing that I will say that's super nice about how these hills are constructed is that after each
As
one,
though they were built for you.
yeah, exactly, yeah,
Glaciers.
yeah, exactly.
Carved them.
Yeah.
Carved them.
Yeah.
Like one day, runners will run this. But I think what's great about how they're constructed is that you've got the uphill, and then you've got a kind of a nice flat to down after each of them, and so you have a little bit of this reprieve after each hill. Some of what we say to our athletes, and what I would say to anybody from a strategy perspective, is you should be letting these hills win in a way where you're going 10 seconds a mile, slower, 15 seconds a mile slower is totally fine, because you're going to be easing up on the burden that you're going to be putting on yourself. You're giving up maybe 5 seconds or 8 seconds or something like that, which you can kind of make up a little bit when you come over the top and are able to accelerate through those downs and then back up to the uphill again. So
I think it's also using the slight down and flat to hydrate and make sure you're taking your fuel, because I think that's the other thing that tends to happen in the hills is people get so sort of caught up in how hard they're working that they forget to fuel. And now you've run 5 miles and maybe not taken fuel in, and you're now heading into, the hardest part of the marathon under-fueled. So just reminding yourself on the back sides of each of those, do I need to drink? Is it time for a gel? Those kind of things are really going to help you finish the race.
Yeah. We did forget to mention, and we shouldn't forget to mention, the Wellesley College cheer tunnel.
Ran it in the rain. Apparently there were a whole bunch of families that were cheering that thought the Wellesley Scream Tunnel was a covered tunnel, and went all the way out there thinking that they were going to be sheltered.
No.
It is not a tunnel.
Alex, anything you want to add on, halfway 13, 14 Wellesley through 21?
No, just that I this might be unpopular again. I think the first Newton Hill is always the worst because it's kind of a shock. And then, that third one before Heartbreak, I think is always, I think it's worse than Heartbreak. And that also might be an unpopular opinion, but I just think the way that
I agree on both. The first one is again, it's one of those very quick RPE changes that's easy to freak out a little bit about.
I'm okay with the first one. I feel like it's if you were to do 4 intervals, right? Your first interval, I'm like, oh, this will be fine. And then I get through the second one and I'm like, shit, I've got 2 more of these. And I get to the third one and I'm like, I'm dead. And then I finish the fourth one and I just want to stop. So
True.
Yeah.
True.
That's my take.
Okay.
What's tricky about them mentally is that some of them are slightly curved. They kind of curve. So you're not just going up in a straight line, you're curving. So mentally you're just is this ever going to end? And realistically, to your point before about time, it's they're so short in comparison. I mean, they're not so short. I shouldn't say that, but the curves really always kind of trick me mentally on that first hill, especially.
Yeah.
When
I think I
actually
gave
running
both
up
of
there.
you a treadmill workout that was essentially each of the Newton Hill lengths,
Yep.
and they're surprisingly short.
Yeah, my hot take would be that Heartbreak's not that bad.
I don't think it's that bad.
If these were just hills you were running in a long run, they're nothing to write home about. It's just where they are.
But I think that actually, Alex, to your point, because the others are a little bit more curved, I think Heartbreak is you can see it.
Oh, yeah.
And because because you have the entirety of it in front of you straight up and you can see the top, and it is one of those things where you feel like you're running and you're never actually getting closer. That's part of what makes Heartbreak mentally a little bit more challenging. But if I'm keeping my head down and I'm not looking up,
I'm just going.
It actually, and you just keep going, and you're just like you're feeling the vibes of the cheering and everything else. Like it actually, I feel like it's like the equivalent of like when like if you're high up and you don't want to look down, and that's scary. I think similarly when you're on the bottom of a hill, you don't really want to look up.
I think optimal is you're supposed to keep your eyes kind of midway.
Yeah.
Because it is psychologically harder if you're constantly looking up and not feeling like you're making progress.
Yeah. So I think that's part of why Heartbreak can
it also
feel
like
a lot
if it had a
worse.
cuter name.
Yeah.
There
Like
was
what?
less
If it was less scary.
It was like fluffy.
I will say, Fluffy Hill.
Yeah.
I did them once. I think it was last training cycle. I did the Newton Hills in reverse, and I thought they were like 10 times harder the other way. And they still weren't, like, it still wasn't that bad, but.
Because going on Boston, the downhill reprieve is way longer than the uphill.
Yeah.
And so by reversing it, that means that you're going uphill for a much longer period of time. And then you're like, you have this quick little down, and then you're back to going up again.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So I think then a lot of people view the last 10K as like it runs itself, and I could not disagree more. If you have run a successful, right, and this is an if, but if you've run a successful 21 miles, then the next bit through the end, like you can do. But if you haven't and you get to the top of Heartbreak and you're spent, then you are in for a long slog. And maybe that sounds like trite to say in the sense that, like, of course, like if you overdo it, it's going to be bad. And if you do really well, then it's going to be good. But I think that the people, to the point we said earlier, like think that this runs itself. The downhill definitely helps. And you definitely, this is where you're going through college town, right? Effectively. Like meaning like you've got like, I don't mean that literally.
You have BC and then you have BU. And
right.
So you have good support.
So you have a lot of like, you have a lot of like drunk college kids that are like cheering you on and stuff.
Particularly if you're in a later wave.
Yeah, exactly. And once you get to 24, this is when like you have 2 full miles to really get there by yourself. The Sitco sign is around 24. And this is the thing that like when I first did Boston, and I was like, oh, the Sitco sign, that's like the finish, right? And it is in no way the finish. You still have multiple, you still have a couple miles to go. But I totally thought that like when you saw the Sitco sign that you were like, you must be, and I don't know why, because I clearly I could have looked at my watch and have been like, oh, I'm still like 5 miles away, but I don't know. I think
that's the point where you feel like you are entering Boston,
right?
Which I think just inherently feels like you must be close, especially after running all of that distance.
Yeah, for sure.
If anything, I think it's disappointing to look at your watch and realize that you're not as close as you think, and then you have miles left, and you're like, oh man, I still got to keep going.
And then so as we've been saying, the last 2 miles, you kind of have to get through it on your own. This is a very crowded, right? Yeah. This is a lot more crowded area of the course. You're in Boston now. You're pretty close to downtown. And so, they actually have like crowd control measures. You've spectated more times than I have. I think this section is actually a little hard to spectate.
I would say I think a lot of people, especially if you are a runner staying near the finish line and you have family with you, it's obviously the easiest place to cheer from because you're going to be close to your home base. But it is one of the hardest places to find your runner, and even from the perspective of if you have, at this point you're fairly close, but if you had gels or a bottle or something, even if you're out in Brookline, all of that is barriered now. So it's very difficult. If you have said, I'm going to be runner right, there are like, sometimes you have to go like a mile before you can cross. So just, I think, be aware as a spectator, particularly if you are tasked with having something for a runner, that it's just give yourself that extra time because you may end up having to go out of your way to get where you're supposed to be.
Meeting a runner before 21 is way easier than meeting them after. In fact, I think it's actually very hard to meet a runner on Heartbreak. I don't know why you would ever want to meet a runner on Heartbreak Hill, but at least before then, like through that whole section and through Newton, right? That's usually where we cheer when I'm not running, and that's very easy to kind of meet people.
Yeah.
So, and then finally, the finish. You've got the famous right on Hereford, left on Boyleston, and
there is that one little. There's the underpass and then the up that feels significant at that point in the race.
Oh, that's a killer.
Yeah,
It's
it's
my
very
least
brief.
favorite part.
Yeah, it's very brief, but you're like, come on.
You're just dying at that point. You're just dying. You're like,
Yeah.
please, this needs to be over.
And when you turn on Boyleston, you have like about a half mile, and it is much further than people think. You can see the finish. And so similar to what we were just saying about Heartbreak Hill, where you can see the entirety of it and you're not obscured by the fact that it's like curved or whatever, as opposed to like Chicago, where I think people have this feeling of like they make a turn and all of a sudden they're there. And here it's very much you make the final turn and like, or similar, it's almost more like Berlin in that case, where it's like, you see the Brandenburg Gate and you think that you're at the end because that's this like image that people see. And then actually you've got another, in that case, I think it's like 400 or 500 meters or more. Here, it's like you've got a full half mile. And so for most people, that's like, even somebody going 6-minute mile pace, it's 3 full minutes of running, which is like forever at that point, right? If you're going 9-minute pace, that's 4.5 minutes of additional running. So it's a decent amount of time on Boyleston, more than I think people think. And so I really don't start getting excited until I've crossed the finish line.
You'll see people like make that, like having cheered in Boston too. You see people make that turn and like start to kick, and then their kick just dies.
Yeah,
and you don't want to have that feeling.
Yeah. Okay, Molly, take us through nutrition.
All right. So as we are recording this, it is race week. So it is time to start thinking about this already. Carb loading is important, and it is a marathon, not a sprint.
What?
Yeah, Matt, tell your story.
Hey, okay, that happened
fine.
one time, okay? And yes, I did a terrible job, and I ate ice cream.
Tried several versions of
I have.
not carb loading, carb loading.
But this is why, hopefully, listeners will feel like I've come from a place of like I've made a ton of mistakes, and I have learned.
Yeah.
And that's not just like this is Matt's lesson. No, these are life lessons.
It should be a multi-day process. So for a Monday race, I would recommend Thursday through Saturday, which then leaves you Sunday, the day before the race, to eat. I would eat the way that I eat before a long run, but not do anything beyond that.
I think that's the goal here, is that like if you approach carb loading right, the Sunday before really should be like a normal day, and that the Thursday, as you say, the Thursday through Saturday should really be the emphasis.
And particularly given that you're not really doing any hard workouts in those days, your muscles can store carbohydrates. I think we have demonstrated in studies at least 4 or 5 days. So you really can, it can be a multi-day build, and you're building on what you did the day before. So there's no need to try to accomplish everything Saturday and Sunday.
Like I did.
Yes.
I also would avoid ice cream. What was the other thing I had? Oh, I think I had pasta and pizza.
Pizza and ice cream.
Ice cream. I had a smoothie, 2 smoothies. This is all one day, by the way. And fries.
Yeah.
Mashed potatoes.
Yes.
Wow, Matt.
Yo,
That makes me want to throw up.
I crushed my eating game, and then I crushed my spirit the next day, and then I crushed a porta potty. It was bad.
Yeah.
Is this an episode of On the Runs or?
Spare no details, as we
Yeah.
like to say.
Yeah.
Beverages are a great option for carb loading, and I think particularly when we're traveling for races. The one that I always plug is like naked juices, which you can get almost anywhere, including like a gas station. Those have, I think, 30 grams of carbs in the orange juice ones or the ones that are kind of like a juice smoothie, and they go down super easy. You're also hydrating as you do it, and I think it is not going to leave you feeling kind of like heavy or bloated the way you might if you're eating 3 bagels in a day or trying to do it with pasta and rice.
Yeah.
So I think that's just something to keep in mind, and especially if you're doing a 3-day load, by the 3rd day, everything you're eating should be sort of simpler and easier to digest. So we're looking for like simple sugars and probably more beverage options by that point. On the first day, maybe you want to, you can do more complex things.
Yeah. I think that's why like pasta is always a good, choice. But I think I've been digging the like sauteed rice options more recently. Speaking of which, Alex, we gotta book dinner for the group of us.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we do. We really do.
Yeah, we'll talk about
By the
that
way,
after.
you guys taught me about the naked juice, so I will second that. It's been a game changer for the carb load because I get so full so fast, and it's like you could have a naked juice and a bagel and feel full, and you're not like feeling disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's up whatever works for everybody else, but that's just what I've experienced.
Yeah, and naked juices are much better than like a Coke, right? In terms of like it's at least giving you other nutritional benefit. And I think certainly if you're not about to run a race or carb load, like naked juices are probably like a lot. That's a lot of calories and sugar. But for a race, it's great. So, but they're obviously like they're touted as being like legit food and legit fruits. So.
Yeah. So again, plan ahead, especially if you're coming in from out of town. I think it's not like it's a secret, but kind of a good pro tip to keep in mind is there's a Trader Joe's that's across the street from Heinz, where the Expo is. So a lot of people will get their number and then go there and stock up on stuff for the hotel room or the Airbnb or whatever. And that I think is also helpful if you do it early in your weekend, because then you can also be planning, if you get there on Saturday, you're still going to be wanting to be carb loading that day.
Yeah.
So hitting a grocery store is always helpful. It's kind of late to be saying this, but making your dinner reservations as soon as possible is a good idea.
Definitely not us.
Yeah, we already made a lot of reservations. We have back
We booked like 8 places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that we can then decide. We like 9+1 to our Boston strategy. That was a very inside joke for New York listeners. Yeah. Anyway.
And plan your coffee strategy in the morning. For race day morning. And I'm always an advocate of like, obviously do what works for you, but if you're a coffee drinker, I still drink coffee on race morning.
Oh yeah. I think the whole like, hasn't it been debunked of like the whole like deprive yourself of coffee like for 2 weeks, and then that way like when you
get
have
more.
it, you get more
I
of a
also
kick.
I wouldn't want. I mean, to me that's a little bit more like something new on race day, also.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does feel new.
Yeah.
But I'm saying more like don't skip it if you're used to it, because it absolutely is a performance enhancer, and even if it's something you're now accustomed to, you don't want to cut that out.
Yep.
And just as a recap, bring snacks. I would say that for any wave start, I think you're going to want something to eat beforehand. Generally, I recommend doing a gel or like a stroop waffle or something that's going to go down easy, maybe within half an hour, 15 minutes of the start, just because you want something in your stomach just so that your digestion doesn't totally shut down and then has to start up again when you take your first gel.
I think that's the key. And I said this earlier that like I prefer an empty stomach, but even with that, and even with my like half a banana, I definitely have a gel that I take within 15 minutes. So, and I think that does facilitate getting your body primed for like, hey, you're going to be consuming stuff. So don't like totally shut down the like stomach and GI system. And so I think that's part of the reason why a lot of probably entirely the reason why most of these gels will stay on it like 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so before, and then every like 20 to 30 thereafter.
Athletes Village does have Gatorade and water. So you can refill a bottle there. I would just, again, be cautious if you're somebody that's like kind of a nervous sipper, that you don't, drink too much water and dehydrate not dehydrate, but lose your salt and dilute it, or just kind of accidentally drink a bottle of water and now you have to pee.
Yeah.
For fueling, I think, now everybody's talking about this, so I don't think it's news, but 50 to 90 grams of carb an hour. Do what you train with at this point, but that's usually what we're trying to hit. Use the same fuel that you've trained with. This is, the cool thing at the Expo is not to be tried at this point.
Unless it's backline gear.
Yeah, we'll pass
You can
for
totally,
that.
Yeah.
The McCarran singlet original, slight plug, is definitely I would bet money. I would bet money that somebody would still be comfortable wearing that if they've never worn it before. That's my pro tip.
Yeah. Morton is what's on the course for nutrition. I think there's 3 locations. That is not going to be.
Are you a Morton or
Morton? I don't say Morton just because it sounds more pretentious than it needs to.
More pretentious?
Yeah.
You say, I don't know if that landed. Did you see what I was trying to do?
I did see what you were trying to do.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you're using Morton, you're going to have to bring your own if you're trying to actually hit 50 to 90 grams an hour.
We have an episode on this. I can't remember if it's episode 9. I think it's episode 9 on fueling. We also have episode 6, maybe, with the founder of Precision. So we have a couple of episodes on race fueling, and so definitely give that a listen to get an expansion of part of what Molly's talking about right now in terms of science of fueling and carbs per hour, et cetera. And we also talk about a lot of different strategies. So maybe late for Boston, but certainly something to think about post Boston and for your next training cycle.
Yeah. And Morton is isotonic, which means it only has limited salt to make it more absorbable, but that does mean it is not going to give you additional salt that will help with your electrolyte needs. So if you're planning on using Morton as your nutrition, just make sure that you are using Gatorade or something else that has salt in it.
I think in general, people should be aware of, and again, kind of to the episode I just plugged of on this, everyone should be aware of whether or not having sodium does not mean it was designed to deliver electrolytes to you as part of your performance. And Morton is not designed to do that. Precision is not designed to do that. And that is not inherently a flaw. It's just something that you need to be aware of and then to compensate for in your hydration.
Yeah. Yeah, so the Morton locations are 11.8, 17, and 21.5. So you're really not even getting anything until almost the halfway point.
I think I'm surprised each year, and this happened for New York as well, where I think it was New York might have only had 2 stations. And I remember there was a subreddit on Morton's offering, and we're like, this isn't enough. And it's like, this is not what you should, the nutrition on the course is backup.
Yeah.
You should have, or supplementation.
Yeah.
It should not be your primary. If you are only having gels.
This is a courtesy gel.
This is a courtesy gel. This is them giving you $15 of your registration fee back. But it is not how you should be managing your nutrition. Yeah. You should have stuff with you, and you should assume that they run out. Yeah. Right? They don't have an unlimited supply.
Hydration is every mile after mile 2, and there's always Gatorade and water. And my sense is Boston generally does a pretty good job of mixing it to normal strength. So I think you can generally count on what the advertised carbs and sodium are. What does vary is if you grab a cup that's full or half full. Again, if this is your plan for hydration, you're just going to have to be a little more aware. Yeah. If it's something that you're treating as supplemental, then I wouldn't worry so much. But if you're always grabbing a half cup as opposed to a cup, just make sure that is actually what you're meaning to do.
Yeah. Alex, what's full disclosure, we coach you. But
no way.
But what is your...
what that is?
Is that why I get workouts?
Is that why you guys keep texting me?
Can you share a little bit about you said earlier that you definitely learned to not be dehydrated. So
Oh, yeah.
can you talk about your plan going into this Boston?
Yeah, I mean, regardless of whether it's hot or not, I'm typically like in every other water station kind of person, just because when I'm taking a bunch of gels and I'm doing salt tabs and all of that, like I will hit a point, as you guys both experienced being my coaches at the Ultra, where I cannot handle it in my stomach. So I'm always like in every other, and then I'm like trying to be very aware of like, okay, maybe I do need to stop at every single one. Like if it's Newton Hills, whatever, I just kind of play it by ear toward the end. But as I get to like the halfway point, it's definitely every other for the water stations. And I'll typically like, just honestly, depends on how I'm feeling. Like I'll always take the water. Sometimes I'll take the water and the Gatorade and just hold on to the Gatorade a little bit, even though it's kind of gets sticky and gross and whatever if it spills all over you. But even if I just take a tiny sip, like even if it's just a mental game with myself, I'll just feel like it's doing something, even though it's probably not. But
Well,
every
there's
other.
there is the thing that if you just even like slosh it around your mouth, that it does give your brain a little boost because it thinks fuel is coming, and you can't keep always playing that game, but absolutely, if
in
you
a
can't,
pinch.
if you're at the point where you're just not going to be able to take any more in and you slosh around and spit it out, that's better than nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Matt?
I mean, I'm a full convert to Precision Fuel and Hydration, and so I really enjoy their gels. They go down well for me. I've tried Huma, I've tried Morton, I've tried Goo, I've tried Science and Sport, although not the beta formula. But I've tried a lot of different things. I've tried sandwich bags full of honey. I've tried taking.
You had those little pink salt salt packets.
Yeah, I bought this like Himalayan. It was the cutest thing. You should have seen it,
Pink
Alex.
Himalayan sea salt.
Pink Himalayan sea salt. Well, people would do the like get the McDonald's little thingies. Like they'd go to McDonald's and rate them of their like salt packets. And that was that's what we did in the day back when we didn't have all these brands doing stuff. And then I was like, who doesn't love pink Himalayan sea salt? And so I just bought like a fucking boatload of pink Himalayan sea salt
Still some in
packets.
your cupboard.
Oh, they're definitely still in my cupboard. And so if anybody wants pink Himalayan sea salt, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to bring it to the Boston Shakeout. And if anybody asks,
Do it.
You can have as many pink Himalayan sea salt packets as you would like. And I would probably enjoy that more. There's a little bit of flavor, than
You're getting your trace minerals.
Yeah, exactly. Over, like a tablet. Precision does have tablets, but like, the thought of like swallowing a whole tablet for me is really hard. So it's a tough pill to swallow,
I can't do those either. But I do love their gels. The Precision gels are my favorite.
Capsules. I thought you did do the capsules.
No, I can't. I did the capsules at the half, and that was like the tester. Remember, because I think I pulled it out of my pocket, and I was like, "Whoa, I feel like a drug dealer right now." It was like free floating in my pocket, and I just pulled it out and like popped one in. It admittedly did not go well for me with my stomach, but that was the first time I did it. And I was using it, obviously, as you guys know, as a training run anyway. So I was like, well, whatever happens, if I have to stop, I have to stop. But the gels work perfectly for me. And I'm just like, I just use the salt tabs that have whatever flavor, and I let them like sit. I kind of look like a chipmunk because they like sit in the corners of my mouth, and it's like extended out a little bit. And I'm like, oh, okay. If someone sees me and I look like a chipmunk, I got some salt tabs in there.
Yeah. I just like to sprinkle some Himalayan pink sea salt on my tongue.
And then you walk by everybody else, and you're like,
I'm like salt baying my face. That's it's like a gourmet meal over here. I've got my Precision, and I'm just like sprinkling a little pink Himalayan sea salt. I think if we propose that to Precision, pink Himalayan sea salt version, salted Precision, I think it's a gold mine.
It's perfect.
Anyway, so, and then they also have a hydration formula that comes in both packet and tab form. I generally take the tabs, and they've got multiple levels. And so if you're a salty sweater, as I am, I'm a very salty sweater, then I take their 1500 formula, which is 1500 milligrams of sodium per liter, and each tablet is 750 milligrams. And so per bottle, right? And bottles are on average 16 milliliters. Maybe you have an 18, maybe you have a 14, but a lot of bottles are that rough size. And so you put one tablet in and you're getting 750 milligrams of sodium straight from that alone, which is important. And I think if people do the math on their own gels, if they do maybe like 2 Humas in an hour plus like a cup or 2 of Gatorade, you're probably not hitting 750. Right, you might be hitting 500 or so. Depends on if you're doing the like
Depends
2x,
on the gel,
the 2x electrolytes. But the normal electrolytes ones, I think, are normally just like 100 milligrams of
there's some
sodium.
200s available. But yeah, for context, Morton has 35 milligrams.
Yeah, and that's why we were saying before, it's not that they have no salt, but they are not designed to give you electrolytes.
Yeah, I think it's just something worth noting, because if it's not a number you're used to paying attention to, it's hard to have a context. Yeah. So 750 versus 35 is clearly a big difference.
Yeah, adjusting on race day is critical. So if we've all been training in the winter, which means that you might not have been training as much, or with consuming as much, because you may not have felt like you have needed it as much, but being able to adjust, to repeat something I said earlier. The challenges come when our rate of perceived exertion starts to exceed that which we expect to be at that point in time. And so if you are not adjusting or being okay with the fact that you have to adjust later in the race, and you therefore are kind of creating this environment where you're feeling like you're working harder than you should be at that point in time, that's when your mind starts to then put brakes on, right? And because it's saying, whoa, you're working harder than you should be, and you start freaking out. If you approach that more calmly and know that you have to adjust, then I think that's a better and more winning strategy.
In terms of kind of thinking ahead to recovery, I think one thing that's kind of overlooked is the better that you hydrate and fuel during the race, the better you're going to feel afterward. So really, you're not just fueling for performance, you're fueling to not feel terrible for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
I always like to have post-race nutrition in my drop bag. And I think, like, for me, it's peanut M&Ms, which clearly are not an optimal choice for nutritional purposes, but that is the thing when I'm semi-nauseous after a marathon that I can reliably still get down and at least hit some calories. So I think if you kind of know the thing that always sounds good to you, like, that's what I would go for in that situation. Optimally, a 3-to-1 carb to protein ratio is the ideal thing, but
something is better than nothing.
Something is better than nothing.
I mean,
whatever works, I think, for you after a race is absolutely fine, and you can kind of worry about getting your protein and those things later in the day. I do usually try to have a protein shake, like a bottled one, in my drop bag too, because that's something that sometimes if I don't want something solid, like, you can at least sip on that and you're getting some protein. So those are good options. But again, try to get something in and then, concentrate on refueling at dinner.
Yeah. Alex, what do you like to have at the finish line?
This is not the healthiest. I always want ice cream.
Beer?
I don't know why. Always.
I want an ice cold beer. That's what I want.
I cannot drink a beer. That's like the last thing.
I think it was like...
But I'll drink like tequila.
Yeah.
No problem.
What? Oh my God. That is the worst. Really?
The beer is crazy.
You'll like swig tequila?
Like really, really cold tequila.
Pro tip, y'all.
It's really only in Boston because my favorite bar is over there.
Okay. Well... All right.
So don't follow my instruction.
Let's bring what about
tequila?
What about mezcal? Are you down for mezcal?
I'm not a mezcal girly. It's like too smoky.
Oh my God. All right.
I feel like I'm just disappointing you guys. Should I leave?
Yeah, you are. No, you're good. You're good. All right, well, let's have tequila for the finish, and
and I'll
Alex
bring
and
you
I
guys
will.
beer.
Alex and I, okay, if both of us have PRs, we'll both have a shot of tequila at the finish line. All right.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah, I generally don't like most of the things that they put in the post-race bags, like apples and stuff, protein bars. I think like candy, can be good. I echo the having peanut M&Ms. That sounds good. Like Swedish fish or something like that, I think also sounds good. But knowing me, I would probably grab something, weird and random from a Trader Joe's and be like, this is going to sound great at the end. And then, I'll be like, ugh, what is this? But it is true though, that like the harder you exert yourself, the less likely you are to feel like you want to eat right afterwards.
Yeah, like high lactate levels really depress appetite, which is why like immediately afterwards you often feel like semi-nauseous or just like food just sounds gross.
Yeah. I will say, we didn't talk about this, but we're kind of nearing the end here. I think that the walking through, since we're talking about recovery generally and the finish line, walking through the finish is, I know that it's so tempting to just be like, I gotta rest. But walking in your calves are what pump blood back up to your heart. And so that's one of the reasons why I think Boston does a better job of making you feel like, and we know some of the people that are part of that handle the medical care in Boston, and they do a phenomenal job, right? They're phenomenal. It's a phenomenal team of people, and they really take care of you. New York always feels like they're trying to rush you through.
Yeah. I feel Boston seems a bit kinder in terms of like, if you stop, somebody's going to ask you if you're okay, and they're not going to just kind of be like, move.
Yeah, they're not going to be like, they're not going to make you feel like you have to move because you are in the way. Yeah. I think Boston makes you feel like you should move because this is the best thing actually for you, which is true.
Yeah.
And while we're on the subject of finish line, the bag check, claiming your bag it's probably the best bag claim I think I have seen at any major in my experience, just because the bags never have to move, so they can have them super organized, and usually when you're approaching and they see your number, they're going to have your bag ready. So it's not, if you're arriving at the finish line at a time when there's a ton of people, you might have to wait, but they do a really good job of just having it for you.
Yeah. Well, I think that concludes our Boston Marathon episode. For loyal Legwork listeners, this is the first episode we've had in a while, but we are getting back into the swing of things for the summer. So you can expect to have more episodes from us as we get back to our sort of regular schedule. We've been busy in the first couple of months, so thanks for bearing with us on the episode front. If you have not headed over to the Allie G show, you should. And for Allie's listeners, if you have not headed over to Legwork, I think you should. That actually might sound better coming from you.
I was just about to say it. If you haven't headed over to Legwork, better get on over there.
Yeah.
No, you guys are the best.
No, and
I talk about you all the time on my pod, so
yeah,
it's an honor to
we
be on
do sponsor
your
it, so you're required.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah,
they only require me to say nice things. No, I'm just kidding.
No, we appreciate it, but we certainly hope that this episode has been helpful for those that are running. But if you know of somebody who is interested in running Boston or is running and just hasn't heard about either the Allie G show or Legwork, please feel free to send them this episode and to encourage them to subscribe to both of our podcasts. We love putting these conversations on and look forward to hearing any feedback and your thoughts about your experience running Boston. So with that, Alex, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with the course. And Molly, thank you for, as always, your expert scientific mind in conveying information. This is where you guys heap praise on me now.
Thank you for having me.
I'm just kidding. We'll leave it at that. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.